Doobity-doobity-doo. Doobity-doobity-doom. Ba-doom. Ba-doom. Boom. Bam, 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 bam. Bam, bam. Doobie-doop. Shooby-doop. Bam, 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 bam. Bam, 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 bam. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. Ba-dum, boom, boom. Ba-da-dum, boom, boom. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. Biddy biddy doo biddy bam bam, biddy biddy boo biddy boom boom, biddy biddy boo biddy bam, biddy biddy boo biddy boo biddy boo biddy boom boom boom, biddy doom boom boom, biddy doom boom boom, da doom boom boom, boom boom boom, boom 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 boom, bam 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 bam, biddy biddy doo biddy ding biding. Hi. This is Decolonizing Is, and I am Yesenia Guadalupe. Today, I would like to talk a little bit about gender. I asked on a poll on Instagram stories what y'all wanted to talk about, and this was it. Gender, sex, sexuality.
Sexuality.
Yes.
These followers are a bunch of putos.
See. There's a whole lot to talk about with this topic. So first, let's talk about gender, right? What's up with that shit? Gender.
There's gonna be a whole different vibe from your other shows.
Yeah, taking it easy. It's later in the day. I'm like more tired than I usually am when I do these. So y'all gonna get what you're gonna get. You ain't paying for this anyway. So you get whatever the you gonna get. I'm doing this for my patrons because y'all are real ones, but everybody else can go yourself. I do what I want.
So I wonder how much of that is gonna be left in the...
Probably none of it. I'll put it in the Patreon. Back to gender. So let's think of a time, right, before colonization, before Euro-Christian bullshit that came to these shores and told people how to live and taught people about fucking gender binaries and bullshit, which only serve to keep the people in power, i.e. white men. Fuck that shit, right? So, before all of this, we were human beings with a spectrum of desires. The way that we existed in the world was as diverse as each and every one of you, just little snowflakes, just, living and experiencing the world and loving however the fuck we decided we wanted to do it. And then came the colonizer and told us that equality among biological sexes, male and female, was bullshit, right? We're appalled at the fact that women would choose their partners and that women would get on top during sex. Like, that was like the most appalling shit.
Gasp.
Clutch your fucking pearls, right? Oh my god, fucking rapist piece of shit colonizer. All of these societies, right? Pre-colonial societies, many indigenous tribes, people were gender fluid. In fact, the people who were non-binary and queer were actually blessings to their fucking communities. There were people who were generally artistic, and they were a blessing to their families because they could take on the roles of both sexes. In indigenous societies, it was thought that the earth was a reflection of the spirit world. And so a person who was feminine, presenting in a masculine body, or vice versa, were thought to be doubly blessed because they were tapping into and blessed with both feminine and masculine energies. And so they were religious leaders and they were like important figures in their communities, and they were looked at and revered and respected, which is the opposite of what queer people are treated as in today's society. And we're trying to get back, right, to a place where indigenous peoples already fucking were before the violence of colonialism. Since it was regarded as something natural and nature was worshipped by indigenous peoples, sex wasn't a taboo thing. It was something to be celebrated. It was something that unified people, and the way that it was expressed was respected in these iterations. But colonialism kind of infected the world, because let's call that shit what it is, a fucking virus, right? It sought to impose patriarchy, which was a very European ideal, right? Into these communities that never really had this kind of imbalance of power among the sexes, right? And the reason for that is so that this hierarchy, right, was introduced into society. If we live in a society that tells us that certain people are more valuable because they are in certain bodies and other people are less than, unfortunately, that's what we're going to believe. Gender and race we can't really talk about one social construct without the other. And I say social construct because these are things that society has created, right? These are not things that are inherent to human nature. These are things and systems and ideas that were introduced to us and to humanity by people who thought that who justified the exploitation of other human beings for their own personal gain and profit. And so when a human being does that to another human being, they have to justify why they're dehumanizing somebody who is like them. And so in our convoluted history, right, white men who were in positions of power would justify subjugation of other human beings based on arbitrary shit like skin color, like gender, like geography. And so it's creating differences when in reality, we're all human. Those differences were constructed, right? That's what a social construct is. In order to justify dehumanizing another person, you have to believe that you're better than that other person. And a way that you do that is by seeing the things that they do and calling those things wrong or against God or savage or an abomination, right? So if gender fluidity is something that was inherent in native culture or indigenous culture, then that was seen as a regression. It was like, well, we, the white power, are inherently better than these people. So obviously we're more evolved, and this expression of sexuality is a regression. These people haven't caught up to our great whiteness. So we're going to vilify that, and we're going to be like, nah, if you do that shit, then that means that you're a savage. And these rules were imposed on white people as well. There came a time at the turn of the 20th century where white people in power, white men in particular, were afraid of black indigenous people of color taking over because of birth rates, because of immigration, right? Particularly to the United States. So in order to combat that, the alternative was to procreate more, right? To have more white babies. And so what that meant was that homosexuality, or folks who were not having babies or not having reproductive sex, started to be compared to black and brown people. And there were even scientific, right? Scientific, quote unquote, studies that showed that white homosexual people were closer in skull or like genitals to black and brown people than to white people. What did that do? That told people that the thing you have to aspire to be is white, particularly a white man. So in order for us to want to get closer to this bullshit ideal, we have to divorce ourselves or remove ourselves or be as far away from all of these things that we're told are of black indigenous people of color. Those are the worst things you could possibly be. The worst thing you could possibly be is gay. The worst thing you could possibly be is black or brown. The worst thing you could possibly fucking be is fat or disabled. It's all these people that society wants to throw away to reach this ideal or this pinnacle of white manhood. Fuck that shit. You know, so anytime that we divide ourselves based on gender, we're playing into the hand of white supremacy. We're playing into their hand. I hope that people become more interested in gender studies from a historical and racial point of view, because these things are inextricably linked. All of these things are tools of colonization. They are tools of division. They are tools of hatred. The gender binary, male, female, as if they're opposite, right? Which is absurd because they're not, because we're all fucking human and we all have different levels, right, of femininity and masculinity, and these things change over time and they change from one moment to the fucking next, right? So the idea of a binary is just absurd. But this idea of a gender binary is part of the project of colonization. Colonization gives people a very rigid set of rules. And if there's a departure from that, then you are labeled as other, you are labeled as wrong, you are labeled as abnormal, you are labeled as less than. So when we conform to these ways of thinking, we're allowing ourselves to be put into a hierarchy. And at the top of the hierarchy is going to be white cis men, because they're the ones who created this structure. We can't allow ourselves to be put into these fucking boxes that serve nobody, right? Because they don't serve us. What we do when we have these ascribed rules of gender and gender roles and what certain people can do or can wear or can say or can fuck, this system tells us that how we show up in the world and when we show up in the world fully, that shit is not okay. You know, and we're told constantly that is not okay. Through violence, through laws, the biggest thing that we need to repair is this idea of binaries in gender, because all of these ascribed rules that we are told are natural, right? Because there's this argument that nature creates gender, and that's not true. Nature is biology, right? Nature is what sex you're assigned at birth, male or female. That has to do with your genitals. That doesn't have to do with your gender or who you are. It's just a reproductive organ. You're not defined by that one thing. This naturalization of white supremacy and this naturalization of gender roles were created to keep people subjugated. And pseudosciences were used to justify that these things were of the natural order when they're not, when they never had been. This normalization of male is this and these are the traits that a male has, and woman or female is this and these are the traits that a woman has, really is a disgrace to the variety of the ways that a single human being can be and can show up in the world and can experience love and pleasure and, you know, all of these things that go hand in hand with sexuality. This topic is a very rich one. There's going to be a ton of resources in the description. I encourage y'all to read those, to be curious, to look into this. There are scholars whose work is to deconstruct this idea of gender. Gender is something that we perform. Gender is not a single solitary thing. It is not something that we all have to subscribe to. It is something that changes. It is something that our ancestors knew and our ancestors honored. The ability for a single human being to be flexible and to exist in a spectrum of sexuality is a beautiful thing. Who told you that something is something that you should do or something that you shouldn't do? And what purpose does that serve, right? These are questions that I want to leave y'all with, because if we don't interrogate the ways that we are taught to exist and to show up in the world, then we just kind of go along with it, but we never really question what the end purpose is, right? And if the end purpose is for us to feel like we're better than another human being, that shit is wrong. Period. That shit is wrong. If something that you're only doing because you think it makes you better than somebody else, you're fucking wrong, bro. You know, so I want y'all to look into the comments here, or look into the description box here. Look at the resources I'm going to share with y'all. And thank you for joining me today. I hope this video made sense. If it didn't, you get what you get, man. You know, I'm doing my best. If you enjoy the videos that we're putting out, this is number 8. We only got 2 episodes left. If you want to see more from us in the future, please consider joining our Patreon, patreon.com/myxxfly. Your support really does mean a lot to us. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time. The behind the scenes rant.
Fuck all of y'all. Ungrateful.
Fuck all of y'all. Except for the patrons. Y'all are the bomb. But
That's
everybody
true.
else can go fuck themselves. Y'all are the reason that we live in the way that we live in. Deadass. Y'all don't support people. Y'all don't. Man, that's another episode. Don't get me started on why we're living the way that we are. Because we don't support each other. But anyway,